objective and scope addresses in the book. Research objective. The fundamental task of this book is to the fundamental task of this book is to focus on clarifying the manifestation of nature in Central Callao. On the basis distinguish between the concept of nature from the nature perspective and nature from the artistic or spiritual perspective. This manifestation this manifestation is observed and identified from three different perspectives. A. Nature in Central Callao as a relation of the nature of the central region. This may be called the natural manifestation of nature. That is, nature in Callao considered from the natural perspective. To carry out the task, the study will examine it's the top day. Hard day. Examine. The study will examine the present of the scene of the sky, scene of the land, scene of the sea, and the world of plants and animals in Central Callao. And B. Nature in its relationship with human life. In other words, nature as a real natural phenomenon existing objectively and how it appears in productive labor, in daily activity, and in the emotion life and perception of central peasants. This is an examination of nature from the cultural perspective. C. Nature as a sign, as an artistic means of Callao. Here, the study will examine. Here, the study will examine the form in which nature appears in Central Callao. It's most of its thing in the form of images, artistic figure and symbols, as well as the system of names that constitute the linguistic space of nature. This may be called the aesthetic. This may be called the aesthetic manifestation of nature. The manifestation of nature as it appears from the artistic perspective. In addition to describing and identifying the manifestation of nature in Central Callao, the study also attempts to point out several characteristics of the cultural region as reflected in natural image and artistic figure, the distinctive feature of landscape and living organisms, as well as the way of life and custom associated with them, elements that have contributed to shaping the local coloration of Central Callao. In examining nature in Central Callao, the study mainly focuses on such subjects as scene of the sky, the sun, the moon, stars, clouds, wind, scene of the land, mountains, forest, river, lakes, scene of the sea, waves, islands, bays, and the world of animals and plants. Here, the concept of nature is understood as the natural world. However, certain elements in inorganic nature, such as soil, stone, gold, coal, and time, morning, noon, afternoon, evening, late night, and as a factor of nature will not be examining in this study. Among natural scenes, the study also only count and describe wild nature scenes, and does not examining domesticated nature, rice field, mulberry field, buffaloes, cow, chicken, duck, point, point. It studied the concept of central Callao. Callao of the central region is understood as the Callao of region extending from Nghệ An to Bình Thuận, that is, including the three sub-regions, North Central, Mid Central, and South Central. Along this coastal strip of the central region, there exist many ethnic groups with their own Callao. In this study, we examine only the lyrical Callao of the Vietnamese king people and focus only on traditional Callao, not considering modern Callao. Lyrical Callao here is understood. Lyrical Callao here is understood as an important part of folk poetry, mainly belonging to the lyrical gene and bearing its own distinct style. It does not comprise the entirely of the poetic text of folk song, and it is also different from certain other genes of folk poetry, such as epic narrative and verse. Lyrical Callao usually contain a lyrical persona. The treasury of traditional Callao, the Vietnamese, in the central region is very rich and have been collected and compiled in various forms. The results of our research are mainly based on a survey of 9,430 Callao entries gathered in the following three sources. First, Treasuries of Callao of the Nghệ region, Volume 1 and 2, edited by Ninh Viết Giao, 1996, Nghệ An Publishing House, and two others. Let's skip the part. In studying nature in central Callao, we will assess from the view that Callao in particular and the folk literature in general is a phenomenon that belongs not only to the field of artistic creation but also the field of folk culture. However, in order to avoid the risk of dissolving its artistic nature into other elements of folk culture, as warned by reputed scholars of folk culture, we adhere to the principle of closely following literary research methods in order to examine and analyze the artistic world in folk literature. Therefore, in this study, alongside the use of ethnographic and cultural analysis of folk literary material, specifically the central Callao entries, in order to identify the regional cultural nuance imprint in Callao verse about nature, we fundamentally continue to approach Callao from the perspective of literature creation. This also explains why chapter 4 of the study entitled Artistic Device expressing nature in central Callao. A study that describes in nature and had cultural studies emphasize such as nature and regional cultural nuance in central Vietnamese lyrical Callao. The use of quantity method is essential. Statistical result considering the number of verses containing words denoting nature in central Vietnam and the frequency of occurrences of words referring to nature scene and objects such as the moon, flower, rivers, mountain, the sea, forest, and so forth in the Callao of different regions provide useful suggestion and well-rounded, reliable conclusion. These data not only help us to form a more concrete understanding of the manifestation of nature in central Callao, but also create the the basis of comparing the present of nature in central Callao with that in the Callao of other regions.